Madam Becky, the mighty lioness of business, the woman whose name could shake boardrooms and make stubborn CEOs tremble, was now lying quietly in a room that looked more like a mini hospital than a bedroom. Machines beeped gently beside her bed, a nurse stood silently in the corner, and the family doctor, old and always frowning, was seated with his glasses at the edge of his nose, again. The once vibrant woman now looked pale, her lips dry, her hands cold. But oh no, don't be fooled, her mouth was still sharp. I said I'm not going anywhere, she muttered, adjusting her blanket. I built this house brick by brick. If I'm going to die, which I'm not, it won't be in some cold hospital where they serve tasteless tea. Madam, you're not going to die, her son Marcus said, pacing like a soldier in training. Let's not say things like that. The doctor will fix this. Right, Doc? The doctor didn't respond immediately. He sighed. Oh, Lord, Gina, her daughter, rolled her eyes. Doctor, with his usual dramatic sighs, you'd think he was the one lying on the bed. The doctor adjusted his glasses. This is serious. I'm trying to be honest. Well, try softly, Madam Becky cut in. My ears are old, not deaf. Servants moved about quietly, their faces heavy. It wasn't just the sickness. They were scared. This was the woman who paid all their salaries, gave them bonuses like it was Christmas every month. If she sneezed, they brought blankets. If she coughed, they called heaven. Now she was looking sick, too sick. Gina knelt beside her mother and held her hand. Mummy, don't scare us. You'll be fine. You're stronger than this. You beat cancer. You beat stroke. You even beat that wicked ex-husband. Becky gave a weak chuckle. That one was easy. All I had to do was throw his clothes out and lock the gate. They all laughed nervously. Even the nurse smiled faintly, but the laughter didn't last. The doctor stood and cleared his throat again. Madam Becky, he said slowly, like someone choosing his last words. The truth is, your kidney is badly damaged, both of them. This time, it's not something medicine alone can fix. Silence. You're saying what exactly? Marcus asked. She needs a transplant, the doctor replied. And fast. Another silence. You could hear the wall clock ticking. No problem, Gina said quickly, forcing a smile. We'll pay for the best transplant in the world. Fly in a doctor from Paris or Mars, I don't care. It's not about money, the doctor said calmly. It's about time. We don't have much of it. Madam Becky blinked. How much time? She asked. The doctor swallowed. Days. A week, if we're lucky. Gina stood up immediately. No, don't say that. Don't say days like we're counting down to her funeral. Yes, doctor, Marcus added. You don't just tell a billionaire she has days to live. Have some respect. Madam Becky looked at the ceiling quietly. Then she whispered, I'm not going anywhere, not yet. I still have things to do. I haven't seen my grandchild. I haven't cut the ribbon for that new tower. Then we fight, Marcus said, voice shaking. We find a donor. We find 10, whatever it takes. Gina nodded. Mummy, you're not dying. Even death knows better than to try you. Madam Becky gave a faint smile. Exactly. I don't die easily. I've been fighting since I was a girl. Let the kidney join the queue. Everyone pretended to be strong, but deep inside, the fear was growing. Fear of time, fear of the unknown, fear that maybe, just maybe, money couldn't fix this one. Outside, the mansion remained quiet, but inside that medical room, a storm had already started. And the worst part? No one was ready for what was coming next. A moment later, after the doctor left the room, the atmosphere inside Madam Becky's medical room was quiet. Too quiet. Only the sound of her oxygen machine filled the air. But the quiet was broken when her assistant walked in and whispered, the staff are all gathered, just as you asked. Madam Becky nodded. Her voice was weak, but her pride was still loud. Bring them in. I want to speak to them. Myself. One by one they entered. Her chef, her driver, her housemaids, her security chief, her personal assistant, everyone who had worked under her roof for years. Some had served her for decades, some for 5 years. They stood in a neat line, heads bowed slightly, waiting. Madame Becky took a shaky breath, her eyes sweeping across them like a dying queen giving her final command. "I've fed you all," she began softly. "Paid your salaries, taken care of your families, given you more than just jobs. I gave you life." The staff nodded slowly. Some looked down in guilt. Some were already wiping silent tears. "But now, it's me who needs help," she continued. "Just one kidney. I know it's not an easy thing. I know it's risky, but I need someone, one person who is willing to help me live." Her voice cracked. "If anyone here is willing to give me just one kidney, I will never forget it till my last breath. I will reward you in ways you cannot imagine." There was silence, pure heavy silence. Then eyes started shifting, feet started tapping nervously. Some tried not to meet her eyes. One maid sniffled loudly but didn't move. The chef coughed and looked away. Her driver adjusted his cap. Her assistant down at her hands. Refusing to speak, no one stepped forward. Madame Becky looked around, hoping someone would say something, anything. But no one did. They all pitied her, they all loved her, but none of them would help her. Tears gathered in her eyes, not just because of pain, but because of truth. That painful truth. People love you and it costs them something. She raised her hand weakly. "You may go." They all left slowly, heads still bowed, but this time in shame. Later that evening, Madame Becky sat with her two children in her private study. The machines had been moved temporarily. Her body was weak, but her voice still tried to sound like the mother they knew, the mother who built an empire from nothing. Tears in her eyes, she reached out and held both their hands. "Please, I gave you life. Now I'm asking you to help me keep mine. One of you. Just one kidney." Marcus gently pulled his hand away and looked at her with a straight face. "Mother, you know I'm the heir to everything you've built. You know how huge the responsibility is. Staying strong, staying complete. It's the only way I can manage the empire when you're gone, if it comes to that. Giving you a kidney might weaken me. That's not a risk I can take." Madame Becky stared at him as if trying to recognize the son she raised. Gina gave a small smile and leaned in. "Mummy, you don't need to beg. We love you, you know that, but I think it's better we find a donor from outside the family. Imagine one of us donating and something goes wrong. What happens then? It won't be nice." She flipped her hair casually. "We can pay any amount to the donor. Just name the price. But me giving out a body part? Nah, not happening." Madame Becky didn't cry this time. She just stared at both of them like someone watching her own heart break in slow motion. She leaned back against the pillow, her eyes empty now. Two children, a mansion full of people, billion-dollar empire, yet not one person willing to save her life. That same night. Marcus sat on one end of the velvet couch, twirling a wineglass in his hand, while Gina sat across from him, legs crossed, a smirk playing at the corner of her lips. The air between them felt thick, like a conversation waiting to explode. Marcus let out a long sigh and leaned his head back against the couch. "It seems Mom is not ready to die," he muttered with a trace of irritation. "Even in pain, she still wants to be in charge of everything." Gina scoffed, brushing her hair behind her ear. Typical her, always trying to control the living, the dead, and everything in between. Her voice turned sharper. "Look, her staying alive isn't my problem, but using our bodies as her backup generator? Nah, not going to happen." Marcus leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "What if there's a way to end all this?" Gina raised a brow. "End what?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned closer and whispered something into her ear. As the words settled, Gina pulled back and stared at him, a frown forming. "Are you serious, Marcus? Are you sure about this?" Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes cold. "Gina, I cross my heart. If we pull this off, we're free. No more dancing to her rules, no more pretending. It means we've blown, it means we're in charge." For a moment, silence fell between them again. But this time it was heavy with decision. Gina gave a slow, wicked smile and nodded. "Then what are we waiting for?" A few hours later, The mansion was dark. All the workers were asleep, or at least pretending to be. Marcus moved quietly into the study room, shutting the door behind him. With a flashlight in one hand and gloves on the other, he began searching through drawers, files and safes, looking for something powerful. Meanwhile, in her mother's bedroom, Gina tiptoed across the room, careful not to wake the sleeping Madame Becky. Her breathing was faint, barely audible. The machine beside the bed beeped slowly, matching the weak rhythm of her pulse. Gina crouched beside the bedside cabinet and began pulling out folders, property documents, company papers, confidential medical reports. Then her phone buzzed gently in her pocket. A call from Marcus. She picked up, whispering, "I'm inside, found a few things, but nothing useful yet." "Check the lower drawers," Marcus replied from the study, quietly flipping through a thick folder. "I'm going through her investment records now. Still no sign of the power of attorney. And the life insurance file?" Gina whispered, glancing toward her mother's bed. "Still asleep." "Not yet, but I'm close. Once we find that document, we're halfway there." "Good," Gina whispered, "because I don't have the patience to sit around and watch her stretch this dying episode like a TV series." They both chuckled softly. "Let's finish this before she wakes up," Marcus said. "Or before Karma does," Gina added with a smirk, ending the call. As they continued their secret search, Madame Becky is having a sound sleep the next morning. The sky was still dim, the morning sun not fully awake, and the whole compound was still calm, until two female nurses dressed in blue uniforms walked through the main doors with quiet urgency. They didn't look familiar, but their badges read Emergency Response Team. "We were sent from the hospital," one of them said politely but firmly to the head maid. "Madame Becky's condition is worsening. She must be moved immediately." Confused but concerned, the household burst into motion. Staff members scrambled to pack her things, nightgowns, medications. Gina and Marcus, caught off guard, exchanged a look but said nothing. After all, this was an emergency, or so it seemed. Within minutes, Madame Becky, still unconscious and hooked to oxygen, was gently placed into a white hospital van. The nurses followed, adjusting her drip, while the rest watched from the mansion entrance, whispering prayers and biting nails. "She'll be fine," one maid muttered, wiping her eyes. "She has to be." The van drove off, but it wasn't going where everyone thought. Hours later, Madame Becky stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open like someone waking from a nightmare. Her throat was dry. Her body was numb. Something didn't feel right. She blinked slowly and stared at the ceiling above her, a ceiling with cracked paint, rusty fan, and a buzzing fly circling overhead. Not the ceiling of any luxury hospital she knew. Her eyes darted around weakly. The walls were faded cream, patched with peeling posters of health tips. The room smelled of disinfectant and old wet clothes. Her lips parted weakly. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice barely above air. "How did I get here?" Just then, a cheerful nurse with tribal marks on her cheeks entered the room. She had just finished checking Madame Becky's heart with a local wooden stethoscope, the kind no high-end doctor would be caught using. "Ah, madam, you're awake," she said with a bright smile. "You're in the hospital. You've been very sick, but don't worry, we are taking care of you." Madame Becky blinked again, confused. She looked down at the bedsheets, thin and scratchy, not the silk ones she was used to. No sign of machines, no sign of her private doctor, no familiar nurse, just this one, smiling like everything was fine. She tried to sit up, but pain shot through her side. Her body collapsed back onto the bed. She gathered strength and whispered, "Why would I be taken here?" But before she could complete the sentence, her breath caught in her throat. Her eyes rolled slightly. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She gasped, then went weak again. Everything around her blurred into silence. The nurse rushed to her side, calling out in panic, "Madam! Madam!" But no one answered. The only reply was the flickering of the dull overhead bulb. A few hours later, the door creaked open slowly. A young girl, no older than 9, stepped quietly into the ward, dragging a rusty mop bucket behind her. Her gown was oversized and stained from bleach and dust. The slippers on her feet flapped with every step. Her hair was tied back messily, and her eyes looked like someone who hadn't truly slept in days. She was just a cleaner, one of the many unseen souls in the hospital. With a sigh, she dipped the mop into the dirty bucket and began mopping the tiled floor. Slow, careful strokes. It was routine now. Clean, mop, move, repeat. But halfway through the room she stopped. Her eyes fell on the patient lying on the far bed, a fragile-looking woman, pale, weak, her body attached to a barely working drip. Her skin looked drained of life. The cleaner blinked. She couldn't look away from her. She looked again, stepped closer, cautiously. This should be a new patient. She wasn't here yesterday. I hope she survived. She clapped her hands together and prayed, God, please don't let her die like other patients. Ooh. Her heart began to race. The cleaner took a shaky breath and quickly went back to mopping, but her hands trembled. She kept glancing back at the bed. So many questions started running wild in her mind. What happened to her? Why was she brought here? This place where sick cockroach can't be properly treated. Was she abandoned? Does her family know she's here? Does she even know where she is? She looked at Madam Becky one more time, and this time her eyes softened. But she knew she had to wait. She couldn't speak now, not while the woman was unconscious, not while the other staff were still watching. So she gripped her mop tighter, forced her hands to stop shaking, and continued cleaning the room like nothing was wrong. But deep inside her, a storm was building. Back at the mansion, morning arrived like a performance. Marcus stood in front of his mirror, adjusting his Italian suit, checking his wristwatch for the 3rd time. In another wing of the house, Gina was applying her nude lipstick, her high heels clicking sharply on the marble floor as she walked. Both siblings, dressed like royalty, stepped out of the house, each entering one of their mother's luxury cars. Not even a blink of hesitation. Marcus took the Bentley. Gina took the Rolls-Royce. Both cars that Madam Becky never allowed anyone else to drive. Engines roared to life. They zoomed off in opposite directions, one heading to the boardroom, the other to the business field. Their mother was lying weak in a cheap hospital, and her children were already sitting on her throne. Meanwhile, at the board meeting, the room was silent as Marcus walked in. Everyone stood instinctively, some out of respect, others out of fear. The executives, the partners, the directors, all seated at the long glass table, waiting to hear what Marcus had to say. He didn't waste time. He stood at the head of the table, fixed his cuffs, and then said clearly, "Good morning, everyone. As you can see, I'm not here for games. My name is Marcus Durojaya, and as of today, I am sitting as the chairman of this company." The room shifted, eyes darted. One older board member leaned toward another, whispering, "Is Madam Becky dead?" No one said so. "But look at him." Marcus noticed the looks but pretended not to. "Hey, I'm here to continue my mother's legacy. I grew up watching her build this empire from nothing, so now I need your full cooperation." He paused, letting the weight of his voice land. "If anyone thinks he or she cannot cope with my leadership, you're permitted to step down." Quietly. The room fell silent. No one moved, not because they agreed, but because fear was already replacing logic. Marcus sat down calmly. He had claimed the chair. Now all he needed was to keep it. Elsewhere, in a real estate office, Gina stepped out of her luxury car like a queen arriving for inspection. Her designer bag dangled on one arm and her phone never left her hand. Inside the office, real estate agents stood as she walked in. "Good morning, Ma." "You're welcome, Ma." She waved her hand dismissively and went straight to business. "I need your past records. All of them. From the last 3 months. Bring them to my email by noon. I want to see every transaction, every deal, every paper signed." The agents nodded quickly, one of them already typing nervously. Then Gina added with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Also, going forward, any new payments or transactions must hold on for now. The room went still. What do you mean, Ma? One of the agents asked carefully. Gina smiled again, sharper this time. You see, the account you normally pay into, that's my mother's account, but there's a little issue with it right now. Technical stuff, so hold off on that. You'll get a new account to start using soon. She turned and grabbed her purse. Like I said, we're changing a lot of things, so I need your full support. And with that, she walked out, heels clicking again like a judge banging a gavel. Far away, in a poor hospital with cracked walls and flickering bulbs, Madame Becky remained unconscious, weak, forgotten. And her empire? Her children were already taking it, piece by piece. That evening, the sky outside the hospital was already dark. The fans hummed lazily, the light bulb in the ward flickered now and then. It was quiet, almost too quiet. A small girl, no taller than the mop she dragged behind her, stepped into the ward barefoot. She wore an oversized faded gown, her tiny hands clutching a wet rag. Her name tag, Hope, was almost falling off her chest. She walked softly across the room, her little feet making soft pats on the cold tiled floor. She wasn't supposed to talk to patients. That was the rule, just clean and go. But something about the woman lying on the last bed always made her pause. She was different. She glanced at her again, the quiet woman with grey hair and breathing tubes, still unconscious, still not moving. Hope sighed, wrung her rag and turned to leave. But just as she reached the door, she froze. She thought she heard something, a sound, a whisper. She turned slowly and looked. The woman had opened her eyes. Their eyes met. Hope blinked in surprise, then her lips stretched into a warm, excited smile. "Ah, Auntie, you're awake!" she said cheerfully, dropping the mop and rushing toward the bed. "How are you today?" Madame Becky's voice was barely a breath, soft and cracked. "Do you think I'll make it out of here alive?" Hope gasped softly. She stepped closer and shook her head quickly. "Auntie, please. Don't say something like that," she whispered. "Don't give up on life. Please don't. Like my mummy did." Madame Becky's weak eyes focused on her, puzzled. "What happened to your mum?" she asked gently. Hope's lips trembled. Her eyes welled up with tears immediately. "My mum, she was a great fighter," she said, trying hard to smile but failing. "She fought so many things, cough, malaria, kidney failure, even when we had no money. She always got better. She was like a superhero." She paused, wiping her eyes with her wrist. "But one day she got very sick. They said it was chronic typhoid. We rushed her here, this same hospital, her first time in the hospital. Her only time." Her voice dropped. "In less than 24 hours, she got worse. She held my hand and asked me, 'Hope, do you think I'll make it out of here alive?' Hope sniffled. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. I was just standing there, watching her." She swallowed hard. 10 minutes later, she died. Madame Becky's eyes widened. Her lips quivered. I'm so sorry," she whispered. Hope nodded slowly. "We had no money to pay the hospital bills, so the only thing I could do was to agree to work here, clean the floor, wash bed sheets, wipe toilets." She looked around the room, then down at her tiny hands. "It's already 6 months now. They said I have to work for 2 years before my small salary can cover everything we owed." Then she looked up again, holding Madame Becky's hand in her little palm. "Please, Auntie, don't give up like my mum. Don't close your eyes. Don't stop breathing, please." Tears began to fall from Madame Becky's eyes, rolling slowly down her cheeks. Her chest shook. She wept silently like a child. No one had spoken to her like this. No one had looked at her without fear, without calculation, just pure love from a child with nothing to give, except her heart. Hope smiled again, still holding her hand. "I will do whatever I can to help you, Auntie. I promise." She stood up gently and wiped Madame Becky's tears with the edge of her rag. "Let me finish cleaning quickly. I'll come back and sit with you. I won't leave you alone, I promise." And just like that, Hope walked out of the room on bare feet with a broken mop, but carrying more strength than anyone Becky had ever known. Back at the mansion! The gates of Madame Becky's mansion creaked open that evening as a black SUV rolled into the compound. The engine purred low, but the tension it brought was loud. Marcus stepped out first, fixing his jacket as he walked around the car. The door on the other side opened slowly, and out stepped a woman with the same face as Madame Becky, only colder, sharper, and without a trace of softness in her eyes. Her name was Madame Benita, Becky's twin sister. But unlike her gentle sister, Benita had a reputation: ruthless, harsh, no nonsense, and from the moment she entered the mansion, everyone felt the temperature drop. She didn't smile, she didn't greet. She walked in like the house belonged to her. Her heels clapped loudly on the marble floor, and the staff, confused and nervous, stood by the walls like statues. Benita stopped in the middle of the living room, arms folded. Then she turned sharply. "Listen up, all of you," she snapped, her voice slicing through the air. "I am not Madame Becky. I am not your former boss. I do not entertain nonsense. If you still want to keep this job, you will obey every one of my instructions to the letter." The staff exchanged nervous glances. Some were already sweating. No one, and I mean no one, is permitted to question anything in this mansion. You work, you obey, you keep your mouth shut, you look down when I pass, you look away, you do not observe me, you do not follow me with your eyes. This is not a market square, it is a home of discipline. There was silence. The staff froze like trees in a storm. Some nodded slowly, others just lowered their heads, confused and afraid. In a corner, two housemaids whispered to each other. "Isn't that Madame Becky's twin sister?" one asked. "She looks like her, but the difference in character is loudo," the other replied, eyes wide. She didn't even ask about Madame Becky, just stepped in and turned the place into army barracks. "My sister, this woman of fire, make you no try her." As they murmured, Marcus stepped forward and clapped his hands once, sharply. "Everyone, listen and listen well," he said, his voice cold. "From today, Madame Benita is the one in charge of this mansion. She speaks, you move. She commands, you obey. No delay, no questions." He looked around slowly, eyes sharp. "If any of you think you cannot give her the same respect, or more respect, than you gave my mother, kindly consider yourself fired already." More gasps filled the room, but no one dared make a sound. Just then, Gina walked in, nodding in agreement. "Let me add this," she said, chewing gum like she was at a fashion shoot. "We don't want any pity looks, gossip or whispering. We've upgraded. If you can't level up, the gate is open." Madame Benita smirked faintly and walked up the grand staircase like a queen taking her throne. The house staff stood still. The cook crossed herself quietly. The butler tightened his lips. The mansion that once held laughter and life now breathed coldness and fear. And still, no one had heard a word about Madame Becky. She had simply vanished. At the hospital. The night air outside was cool, but inside the ward it was still and heavy. The dull light above flickered again. Hope pushed the mop bucket into the room quietly, but this time she didn't look at the floor. She walked straight to Madame Becky's bedside. There was something in her little eyes, seriousness, mixed with fear, but above all, love. She leaned closer and whispered quickly. "Please, Auntie, if anyone comes in here and asks why I'm here, tell them you called me. Just say you wanted to talk to me, okay?" Madame Becky blinked, puzzled. "Why?" she asked weakly. Hope looked around nervously, then lowered her voice. "Because people die in this hospital every day," she said. "Most of the people they bring here are people who don't have money, or people their families don't want anymore." She paused, watching the sadness sink into Madame Becky's face. "So, why are you here?" Hope asked softly. "Why didn't they take you to a big hospital? A better one, with real doctors and big machines?" She stared at Madame Becky's face like she was searching for the truth buried in her wrinkles. "And what exactly is your sickness?" Madame Becky's lip trembled. She wanted to lie. She wanted to change the topic, but something about this little girl's honesty made her heart spill. She looked away and whispered, "The only answer I can give right now is, if I don't get help, I have less than a week to live." Hope's eyes widened. Madame Becky continued slowly, her voice thin as paper. "Both of my kidneys are bad, and without someone donating, that's it. That's the end. It's a death sentence." Hope stared at her, shocked, silent. Then she frowned deeply and nodded to herself. "My mum once had kidney problems," she said quietly, "but she didn't come here. She treated it herself. She used some herbs. I know all the herbs and I can prepare it very well." She trailed off, thinking. Then she looked up at Madame Becky again and stepped even closer to the bed. "Let me try what she did first. I'll try everything I saw her do." "But Auntie," she hesitated, then pressed Madame Becky's hand softly, "if that doesn't work." She looked left and right to make sure no one was watching, then leaned in and whispered a shocking promise into the woman's ear. "If it doesn't work, I'll give you one of my kidneys." Madame Becky's eyes snapped open wide. "What?" Hope nodded with tears in her eyes. "Yes, I mean it. I don't want you, Auntie. When mothers die, children suffer. I've seen it. I've lived it. Your children don't deserve to suffer. I will help you. You can have one of mine." The room fell silent. The machines beside the bed beeped slowly, like even they were stunned by what they heard. Madame Becky opened her mouth, but no words came out. She simply stared at the tiny child in front of her, so full of bravery, love and pain, offering what even her own children wouldn't. And then the tears came again, big heavy drops. But this time she didn't cry like a baby. She cried like a mother who just found a daughter she never knew she needed. Hope held her hand tighter. "Don't be afraid, Auntie. You're not alone. Not anymore. I won't allow you to die." The next morning, a black convoy rolled into the headquarters of Becky Holdings. Security men stood straight. Staff members watched through the tinted glass walls. Something felt wrong. Something cold and unsettling was in the air. The glass doors swung open and Madame Benita walked in, flanked by Marcus and Gina. She was dressed in a sharp suit and dark sunglasses that never left her face. Her presence swallowed the room. She didn't greet. She didn't pause. She marched straight into the executive office, Madame Becky's sacred space, and sank into the CEO's leather chair like it had always been hers. The room fell deathly quiet. Moments later, she called for a full board meeting. No excuses, no delays.
"In the boardroom."
The long conference table was full, but the atmosphere was heavy. Board members whispered among themselves. Most of them had worked with Madame Becky for decades. Some had met her twin sister. Some didn't even know she existed. Yet here she was, sitting in the same chair, giving the same orders, with none of the same heart. Her voice cracked like a whip as she barked. "I need all original documents, every file on our real estate projects, the overseas branches, joint ventures, everything Becky built. Bring them to me, now." The eldest board member, Mr. Olani, stood up slowly. His hands trembled as he handed over the files. "Madam, these are the originals. We've maintained them carefully under Becky's instructions. With all due respect, Ma."
"May I not?"
Benita cut him off sharply. She snapped open the files, one after the other, flipping through them like old newspapers. Then she hissed loudly, "This is madness. Why did Becky own so many things? What's the point of owning 100 companies if you can't monitor 10? She tossed a folder aside. "We're selling off some estates, shutting down some international branches. I will restructure this empire the proper way. Lean, strong, focused." Gasps flew around the room. One of the younger board members tried to speak. "But Ma, these estates bring in long-term revenue. If we sell off too much, it could..." "Could what?" she barked. "Are you the new strategist now, or is your loyalty to the past?" The man went silent immediately. From the corner, Marcus folded his arms and added coldly, I suggest everyone cooperates with the new system. You either flow or you're flushed out. Gina sat beside him, scrolling on her phone like nothing mattered. A braver woman among the directors stood and asked quietly, Please, how is Madam Becky's health? Any updates from the doctors? The room paused. It was the only question that came from a place of care, but Marcus slammed his fist on the table. Is that your job? Since when did you start interfering in family affairs? I'm sorry, sir, she stammered, sitting down immediately. The tension turned into fear. No one else dared speak again. Madame Benita looked around slowly, eyes cold as steel. Good. I want total silence and total support. You work for the company, not the woman. Becky is unavailable. But we are here. With that, she stood, picked the documents, and walked out of the boardroom. Marcus and Gina followed her. Behind them, the board sat in stunned silence. Whispers followed. Something's not right. This doesn't feel like a transition, it feels like a takeover. She didn't even mention Becky's name with respect. She talks like she's already gone. But no one dared say more than a whisper. Because in Becky's chair now sat someone with her face, but not her heart. And for the first time in Becky Holdings, everyone feared the future. 2 days had passed. Hope entered Madam Becky's ward quietly, same time every evening, her mop bucket squeaking at her heels. But this time she wasn't there to mop. She locked the door gently from inside, tiptoed to the bed and whispered, Auntie, I brought it. Madam Becky turned weakly and saw the small girl unwrapping something from a piece of brown paper. It was a small black pot, something that clearly didn't belong in any hospital. Inside it was a dark, bitter-smelling herbal paste. What's that? Becky asked softly. Hope leaned close and whispered, This is what my mummy used to take. Every time her body felt like it was shutting down, she used to call it life pepper, even though it doesn't have pepper inside. Madam Becky gave a weak smile. Are you sure this won't kill me faster? She joked dryly. Hope rolled her eyes like a child mimicking an adult. You're already saying you're dying, so what do we have to lose? She said cheekily, and both of them chuckled, but then Hope's face turned serious again. Please, Auntie, don't tell anyone. I hide it inside the empty oxygen tank at the back of the ward. No one checks there. It's our secret. Becky nodded, understanding. And you two, she added, don't trust everyone here. I think someone is giving updates about me to an outsider. Hope's eyes widened. Who? Madam Becky lowered her voice. There's a nurse. The short one with the sharp eyes. I saw her pressing phone beside my chart and whispering. I pretended to be asleep. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but it was about me. Hope looked toward the door, afraid. Do you think they want you to? I don't know, Madam Becky whispered, but I know when something feels off, and something definitely feels off. Hope sat beside her and gently began rubbing the herbal paste on Madam Becky's legs and arms, muttering quietly like her mother used to. You'll be fine, Auntie. Let's confuse them. Let's heal in secret. Madam Becky looked at the little girl and smiled faintly. Who are you really, Hope? I'm the cleaner, Auntie, but maybe also your small doctor. And they both laughed again. Meanwhile, just outside the ward, down the corridor, the short nurse stepped out from behind a wall and dialed a number on her phone. Her voice was low. Yes! She's still alive, but she's very weak. She will definitely drop dead soon. I have not received my second payment installment, and today is already going to the end. A pause. Then she nodded slowly and whispered. Understood. She hung up and walked away. The sun was already high when Hope, now wearing a faded but slightly neater gown and slippers that were too big for her feet, walked confidently into the central police station. The officers at the front desk barely noticed her at first. Just another child, probably lost or hungry. She walked straight to the reception table and cleared her throat. Good morning, sir. My name is Hope. I'm here to see the Commissioner of Police. The officer in charge, a heavy man with a loud laugh and a bigger ego, glanced down, blinked, then burst into laughter. You? You want to see who? He nudged his colleague. This child says she wants a private meeting with the commissioner. Maybe she wants to arrest someone. The others joined in the laughter, but Hope didn't flinch. She stood still, looked him squarely in the eye and said with surprising calm, "Yes, I want to speak with him. Privately. Until I see him, I won't say anything, and I won't leave." That wiped the grin off one of the officers' faces. "Look, little girl," he said, "we don't allow people in here without knowing what they came for." "Then I'll wait," Hope replied gently, and she did. Hours passed. She sat quietly on the bench, hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. She didn't eat, she didn't sleep, she didn't speak to anyone. Her determination was louder than any tantrum could be. Finally, curiosity won. A female officer walked up to her. "What's your name again?" "Hope." "What's the matter?" "Please," she said softly, "Barley, just tell the commissioner Hope is here, and that it's very confidential." Within minutes, the corridor was whispering, phones buzzed, and then a deep voice echoed from the hallway.
"Let her in, her in."
Inside the commissioner's office. Hope walked in slowly, holding a small brown envelope in both hands. The office was large, filled with medals and framed photographs. The commissioner, a man in his late 50s, sat behind the desk, tapping his pen until his eyes met hers. She stepped forward, bowed slightly, and handed over the envelope. "Please, sir, it's very confidential." He opened it slowly. As he read the letter inside, his eyes widened. He leaned back in shock. "Are you absolutely sure this came from her?" Hope nodded. He blinked several times, then slowly turned and waved at the other officers in the room. "Please, excuse us." They filed out one by one, confused. When the door finally closed, the commissioner stared at Hope with watery eyes. "What really happened to her?" Hope stepped forward, voice quiet and full of emotion. "She's in a very bad hospital, not by choice. She was dumped there. The room was still." The commissioner lowered his head, then looked up again, his voice tight with emotion. "That woman saved my son's life." Hope blinked. "She did?" He nodded slowly. 21 years ago, my son was born with a condition that could have made him blind in 72 hours. I was still a junior officer. I couldn't afford the emergency surgery he needed. He smiled faintly at the memory, even though his eyes were now full of tears. That day, Madam Becky walked into the hospital. I'll never forget it. She told the doctors, "Any child here whose parents can't pay, give them what they need. I'll pay for all of it." He wiped a tear away quickly. She didn't even know us. She didn't need to. She paid for the surgery. When it failed, she sponsored us to India. Everything, flight, hotel, medical costs. Today, my son is a military pilot with 20/20 vision. Hope smiled softly. The commissioner stood up from his seat slowly. "Now, it's my turn to help, and I will not say no to her." He picked up his phone. "Prepare an emergency transport van, a private medical escort, and alert my personal doctor. We are leaving tonight." Then he turned to Hope. "You've done something even grown-ups were too scared to do." Hope tilted her head. "I only did what my heart told me, and Auntie Becky doesn't deserve to die." The commissioner nodded slowly, heart full. "Don't worry, Hope, from today she's under my protection." A few minutes later, the police cars pulled into the local hospital. Slam! The ward door burst open as 4 armed officers stormed in. "Hands up, Nurse Janet," barked the lead officer. "You are under arrest for leaking private health records and aiding a potential murder plot." Before she could even blink, cold metal cuffs snapped around her wrists. "It wasn't me. I was just giving small updates. Please, I didn't mean." But she was dragged away, wailing. 2 other officers moved quickly to Madam Becky's bedside. They glanced at the unconscious woman, pale but breathing steadily. The lead officer made a call. "Target secured. We will do as planned." Moments later, 2 police officers gently wheeled Madam Becky out and lifted her into a black SUV with tinted windows. The convoy moved not toward the better hospital as earlier planned, but to an address only the officers knew. 20 minutes later, the gates of a sprawling mansion slowly opened. Yes, Madame Becky's mansion, but something felt off. Music, balloons, wine glasses clinking, guests walking around in glittering clothes. The gates were wide open and a grand banner hung across the porch. Happy day. Inside, the entire place glittered with lights and laughter. Madame Benita, her twin sister, sparkled in an orange lace gown, beaming with fake joy as she welcomed influential guests. "Eat, drink. It's a happy day. Forget the past and let's move forward," she declared into the microphone. Beside her, Marcus and Gina, Becky's own children, posed for selfies with luxury realtors and online influencers. Nobody wore black. Nobody looked sad. Nobody mentioned Madame Becky, because they thought she would never return. But a moment later, the police convoy rolled through the front gate. Music screeched to a stop. Guests froze mid-dance. Marcus looked out the window and cursed under his breath. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. One police officer stepped out and asked to speak with Marcus. "We're here under strict instructions. Where is Madame Becky? We are to see her." Marcus fumbled, voice shaking. "She's under intensive care," he said. "We chose to keep her health private. The media can be cruel." "You chose," the officer cut in coldly. "Yes, it's what she instructed us to do," Marcus added. But before he could say another word, one of the black cars parked in the middle of the compound opened slowly, and out stepped Madame Becky, alive, healthier, smiling, wearing a simple purple gown. Her eyes burned with fire. The entire compound went still. The music crew dropped their equipment. A champagne bottle slipped from someone's hand and shattered. Even the birds seemed to pause in the sky. Benita's lips parted, but no words came out. Marcus took 2 slow steps back. Gina blinked repeatedly like she was seeing a ghost. Madame Becky stood beside the car and gave a short nod to the officers. "Thank you, gentlemen. I'm home now." Then she turned her eyes to the crowd, to her twin sister, to her children, and finally to the guests. "I see a party was thrown," she said gently, "but no one thought to invite the owner of the house." A few people gasped. The shame in the air was louder than the silence. Madame Becky chuckled softly. "Benita, Marcus, Gina." She turned her face toward the trio. "Now that I'm home, it's time to tell everyone the truth." Madame Becky smiled softly and took a few steps forward, her eyes fixed on Benita, who stood frozen in shock, her glass of wine slipping from her trembling fingers. "Benita," Madame Becky said calmly, her voice carrying both pain and power, "you are my blood, and yet you chose to betray me like this." Gasps echoed from the crowd. Flashback. 30 years ago. I had just gotten married, 3 months into my marriage, and life was beautiful. Until we got the devastating news that my twin sister, you, Benita, were involved in a ghastly car accident. She paused, her voice thick with emotion. "My husband, God bless his soul, rushed out immediately to save you. He found you unconscious on the roadside and drove you himself to the hospital. But while speeding, he ran into a trailer. The accident shattered his spine and destroyed his ability to have children." Benita's lips quivered as tears welled up in her eyes. "You recovered, Benita. You walked again. You smiled again. But my husband, he never did. He spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair because of you." Becky looked around at the silent guests. No one dared breathe. "Years passed and you came to me, pregnant, unsure of the father. You were going to abandon the baby, but I stopped you. I took him in and raised Marcus as my own son." Marcus' eyes widened, the ground beneath him seemingly giving way. 2 years later, another child, Gina. Again, you abandoned her at the hospital, and again I brought her in. I loved them like they were mine. I never let them know the truth. I carried the shame, the sacrifice, the pain, all in silence. Benita, you later had other 2 children for your new husband. And I was so committed to you and your new children, I still take care of them like my own. She turned her gaze to Marcus and Gina. "I gave you everything. Love, a name, education, inheritance, and still you plotted to kill me. Pulled out the test result from her handbag and handed it to the officer. The doctor said that something had been added to my meals for months, slowly damaging my kidneys. I didn't want to believe it, but now I know it's true. The police officer scanned the report, nodded grimly, then signalled his men. "Arrest her," Madam Becky said firmly, pointing at Benita, "and arrest Marcus and Gina for attempted murder."
No!
Benita wailed, falling to her knees. "Mother, please," Marcus cried, reaching for her hand. "Don't call me that," she snapped. "Benita is your mother. I was never your mother." She took a deep breath, then smiled and opened her arms. "But thanks to Hope, I survived." The crowd turned to see the frail-looking girl standing quietly in a corner, eyes filled with tears. This homeless orphan girl. Becky's voice softened, gave me a herbal remedy that healed me completely. She even said, if the remedy didn't work, she would offer her kidney. She was ready to die for me. Hope covered her mouth, trying to hold back sobs. "She is now my daughter," Madam Becky declared proudly. "She will be my official heir. I will adopt her legally. She gave me life, and from today I will give her the life she deserves." Everyone applauded as the police dragged a screaming Benita and her children away in handcuffs. Madam Becky opened her arms again. "Come to me, Hope." Hope ran into her embrace as tears rolled down her cheeks. "You're no longer an orphan," Becky whispered. "You're my daughter, and no one will ever hurt you again." After then, Madam Becky fully adopted Hope, not just in words, but in action. She gave her the life no one ever gave her. Hope was enrolled in the finest schools, both at home and abroad. She travelled, she studied, and she grew into a young woman with wisdom far beyond her years. At just 21, Hope graduated with honours and returned home, not to the streets, but to sit at the head of the table. She was officially crowned the CEO of Becky Cole Group of Companies, a billion-dollar empire once built with love, nearly destroyed by betrayal, and now rebuilt with truth and grace. Madam Becky, now old and grey, spent her days laughing with Hope, her daughter not by blood, but by loyalty, sacrifice, and destiny. They went on vacations together, hosted charity events, and created homes for orphans. The same girl who once had no roof over her head now provided shelter for thousands. And as for Benita, Marcus, and Gina, their chapter had closed behind iron bars, facing justice for their wickedness. The same hands they used to poison and plan were now cuffed by the very law they mocked. But in Madam Becky's mansion, there was no sorrow, only laughter, healing, and love. Because Hope didn't just get a second chance. She became someone else's second chance too. Hello, my besties. What a journey. From a homeless girl to a billionaire's daughter and CEO, Hope's story reminds us that destiny can be delayed but never denied. No matter how dark your past may seem, your light will shine if you choose kindness, courage, and truth like Hope did. Moral lessons. Kindness never goes unrewarded. Betrayal may hide for a while, but truth always wins. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if this story touched you. And remember, besties, I love you all. See you in the next video. You are my darling. Besties forever.